For a long time in endometriosis, there has been very little advancements in the treatment of symptoms of the disease. This is a fascinating Endo Summit Live where we explore a novel treatment for endometriosis. Check it out. Welcome to our very first Endo Summit Live of the 2021-2022 season. Tonight, we have an amazing opportunity to talk about new research and new product development in endometriosis by women with the disease, for women with the disease. And it's a chance when everybody says we are out there to make change. This is something that could really create change, and you could be a part of this change. So welcome. We have amazing researchers here tonight, and also my conference buddies, because these are who I like to, when we're allowed to go places live, this is who I like to hang out with the most, because they run this best lab in Puerto Rico for research, but they're the most fun, the best sense of humor, and really amazing people to be around. Annelyn, Dr. Torres is going to start. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Sally, thank you so much for this invitation. I am Annelyn Torres-Reveron. I am a researcher and now have become an entrepreneur, right? Because I am directing the academic spin-off startup Sur180 Therapeutics that we're going to be talking today a little bit about how it started, right? And where we're going afterwards. I have been doing research in endometriosis for around 10 years, collaborating with Caroline and Idhaliz. I have a large interest in women's health and changing, of course, you know, the scenario and bringing new stuff for us. I mean, that works. That's what I want. So Caroline, if you want to say a little bit about you.
Yeah, I'm Caroline Appleyard. As you can maybe tell from my accent, which apparently still exists, I'm originally from Scotland. I have been mistaken for being Puerto Rican at some point in time, but no. I have been collaborating with these two lovely ladies for a long time, and I've been talking to Sally for several years now. I'm a clinical pharmacologist by training, and I'll be telling you a little bit more about my journey and our journey as a team as we get started. Idhaliz.
Oh, so hi everyone. It's fantastic to be here. This is like it's like a dream come true, really, when you get to do wonderful stuff with your not only your colleagues but your friends. I mean, it just makes it's a great difference. I'm Idhaliz. I've been doing endometriosis research for close to 20 years after I was myself affected with the disease, and I thought that I should use and I could use my expertise and training in research, molecular biology, immunology, etc., to try to understand better the condition that was affecting me. And that's how it all started. Long ways in here in Puerto Rico, and I'm very proud to be part now of a network, because we are now a network of people, students. I mean, it's an amazing group of people that day in, day out, that's all we do. We study endometriosis and women's health.
Idhaliz, I wonder if you can share with everybody your side obsession, I'm going to call it, because a lot of people might not know what Endometriosis Puerto Rico is.
You mean the foundation of patients?
Yeah.
So as a researcher, when I started recruiting patients for donating blood and tissues and samples and data, the patients themselves will call me and ask questions and tell me that they felt that they were misunderstood. They didn't know who to talk to. So lo and behold, I understood there was a need, a space to create a patient association foundation. And I gather a group of people, experts, medical doctors, and patients themselves, and we founded Endometriosis Puerto Rico in 2005. And we now have a presence in Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we try to raise awareness and also collaborate with the research. So we do things together, and it's been an amazing journey because I can do the research, but at the same time directly interact with the patients, hear from them where their needs, where the things are important to them, and you'll hear more about it when I talk about what we do right now and what we will be doing.
Right. So one of the things that we get asked at the Endometriosis Summit all the time is, why is there no programming in Spanish? And I say, I don't need to do that because Endometriosis Puerto Rico does that. So if you're looking for that as a resource, I just want everybody to know this is the person you reach out to. So Annelyn, do you want to go ahead and kick it off tonight?
Sure. Let me start sharing my presentation. Okay, is everybody seeing the first slide? Okay, so what we're going to be talking today is going to be sort of, I mean, not sort, it is a story, but the story centers around the science between how stress affects endometriosis, and we're going to be targeting this from different point of views. So in the first part of the seminar, what you're going to be hearing today is how we formed, what is the story behind our team working together. You're gonna also hear the science behind it, the basic science, and then also the translational aspect, how we have gotten some of the elements of how stress and then affects endometriosis and stress alleviating techniques, some pharmacological, which is actually the site of Sur180 Therapeutics. And at the end, you're going to hear where Sur180 is going and a little bit more about the company, which is we're hoping that it was going to bring novel therapeutics, right? Novel medicines for women with endometriosis. So to start talking about the team and some of the basic science, Caroline will take it from here. And I'm going to start advancing the slides. Caroline, just tell me next when you want me to go.
Okay, so again, thanks for inviting us here to share a little bit about our story. This is an old photo. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how our team got together. So I ended up in Puerto Rico in 1998. I went to what was originally known as Ponce School of Medicine, now it's Ponce Health Sciences University. And my area of interest at that time was the study of intestinal tract, so inflammation in the gastrointestinal system, particularly inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease. I met Idhaliz when I went there. It's a small institution, so through several different conversations, we realized that there were a lot of similarities as well as differences between the two chronic conditions, between endometriosis and inflammatory bowel disease. And that led to us getting a grant to start looking at those. And that was when we first set up the animal model of endometriosis in my lab. At that time, I was also becoming very interested in neurogastroenterology because we know within the intestinal system that stress has a lot of very detrimental effects. I mean, most people know, whether or not you're anxious or you're studying for an exam or something, there's a lot of detrimental effects from stress on the GI tract. So I was really interested in trying to find out a little bit more how it might impact endometriosis, because there was some evidence. We know that obviously patients are dealing with a lot of different things when they have endometriosis, and it's very impactful on their daily life. So there was a neuroscientist at that time in my department, Dr. Kenina Thompson, on the right-hand side there. We recruited her to help us set up the stress protocols. So that led to a grant. We were working on looking at this. As she transitioned into administration at the same time, we were very lucky that Annelyn came down to Puerto Rico, or rather came back to Puerto Rico from New York. And with her neuroscience background, kind of took over from what Dr. Thompson had been doing and was able to expand that and actually get a supplement to the grant, and then eventually a fellowship to look in more depth what was going on centrally and within the brain. Next slide. So I think the reason that we've been able to collaborate successfully for so long, I mean, it's quite a long time now. For Idhaliz and I, over 20 years, since a long time, is the reason that although we have very diverse backgrounds, we also complement each other. So, you know, we have a neuroscience side through Annelyn. Idhaliz is trained as a molecular biologist, and then I'm a clinical pharmacologist. So together, I think our expertise complements each other towards trying to find some novel solutions for endometriosis. Next slide. So over the years, we've obviously published a lot, and tonight we're just going to be talking about a few of these different studies. Next. So thinking a little bit more specifically about the science behind what we're interested in, the hypothalamic pituitary axis, or the HPA axis up here for short, is basically one of the main systems in the body which is responsible for maintaining homeostasis and helping to regulate our response to stress. So at a physiological level, stress increases cortisol output by activating this HPA axis that you can see here. So CRH, or corticotrophin releasing hormone, is released from the hypothalamus, and then this can cause release of ACTH from the pituitary, which will eventually lead to glucocorticoid release from the adrenal cortex. And all of this can act within the different body systems and have a lot of detrimental effects. Now, it's important to point out that CRH receptors are found not only centrally, but also peripherally within, for example, the reproductive system. Now, most pharmacological treatments to date have focused on this right-hand side, on the hormonal axis, through perhaps a gonadotrophin releasing hormone suppressors. But what we were interested in is trying to look at more what was going on with the stress input and activation of the HPA axis, and could that possibly be a way of helping to control the condition or interfere with the process, just like we know that stress impacts other chronic diseases. Next slide. So our hypothesis was that if stress was activating through these various different regions, so impacting the hormonal system, causing release of cortisol, as well as increasing inflammation, cell infiltration, things like macrophages, mast cells, release of different inflammatory mediators, that if we could control this either behaviorally or pharmacologically, then we could decrease the effects and then basically help impact and down-regulate on the left-hand side here the endometriosis symptoms. So in theory, if we could interfere with that stress process, then hopefully we could help down-regulate the pain, infertility, and improve quality of life. Next slide, please. So to carry out these studies, we use an animal model of endometriosis. Now, obviously, this is not exactly the same as the human condition. In particular, we use the autotransplantation model. It's a rat model, and rats don't have menstrual shedding. So obviously, there's a big difference there. But not only our lab, but other different labs have validated this model very well in terms of gene expression and the fact that the tissues respond in a similar manner to the tissues from patients. So what happens here is after verifying that the animals are reproductively mature, we basically implant small pieces of the uterine horn, and we attach these by sutures to the vessels of intestinal mesentery. And then over time, this ranges from a month, 2 months, different time periods, we allow this to develop. And when we go in and sacrifice the animals, you can see that these cyst-like structures, these vesicles, develop. Next slide. So this just shows the experimental timeline for the stress studies. And you can see here that after surgery, we exposed our animals to stress. We used either an uncontrollable or controllable stress protocol. The uncontrollable stress protocols, basically we put the animals, the rats, into this pool of water and they swim around. They find this stressful and they're trying to escape. We allow them to swim for about a minute before we take them out. In the controllable stress scenario, there's actually a small submergible platform you can see here, as pointed out by this blue arrow, and the animals, using cues around the room, can learn how to locate that platform and basically escape from that the water environment. Next, Annelyn. So when we opened animals up and looked for the evidence of what happened from the stress on the endometriosis, you can see here in this graph down in the left-hand corner that the animals that received the uncontrollable stress, the black bars, when we grade the implants based on how large they are, they developed a lot more of these vesicles and cyst-like structures, as well as being of larger size. So they had a higher grade. And this is also seen on the right-hand graph, where you can see there's a significant increase just in the overall area of these vesicles. Now, importantly, when the animals were exposed to the uncontrollable stress, so the gray bars, we can see that this was able to reverse this. So the stress, the uncontrollable stress makes it worse, but the controllable stress can reverse it and make it more similar to just endometriosis alone. Next slide. Now, in addition to the stress being able to increase not only the number, but the size of the cysts, we have also been able to show in our studies that the stress is able to increase cellular infiltration, so things like macrophages, mast cells. It's able to increase nerve growth factor and its receptors in the uterus, also in the colon. This is very important because these nerves could be playing a role in the pain that's observed. It's also able to increase the colonic damage we find, as well as change the motility of the colon and the uterus. So all of these results basically tell us that yes, indeed, stress, whether or not it's actually given before the induction of endometriosis or after, as we've shown here, is able to exacerbate the condition. And I think more importantly, that if we are able to interfere with that, we can help reverse it. So now I'm going to pass it over to Idhaliz, who's going to talk a little bit about the translational aspects.
So as you have seen, we have gathered substantial experimental data in the animal model that shows that stress indeed can make endometriosis worse. But importantly, there's plenty of data and ample evidence from human studies showing the impact of the symptoms of this disease can pretty much impact all aspects of a patient's life. So these opens up the opportunity to bring into the table novel ways to tackle this impact, right, beyond just medical management. So we would like to provide evidence for the efficacy of alternative treatments, and in particular, those that counteract stress. Next. So we first tested this idea using our experimental model to ask this question: can stress management increase the resilience and really impact endometriosis presentation? So we decided to test a behavior intervention that's called environmental enrichment. And what it is, it involves three components. It's open spaces, novelty, and social interaction. Next, which in the animal model will translate to having larger enclosures, more animals per cage, and as you can see, a wide variety of toys that were changed weekly so that to create a novelty. Next. So what happened when we exposed these animals to environmental enrichment is that we saw how the size and the number of endometriotic vesicles was reduced by this behavioral intervention. But not only that, but anxiety also decreased. So what these data is suggesting is that it's important to understand the effects of the stress on the HPA axis. And we believe that these data, this information could lead to development of innovative and integrative therapeutic approaches. Next. So what to do next after, after you see these great and encouraging results in the animal model. The next step, of course, is to try to implement this into humans. So this is what we thought we would do. The open spaces would be, meeting in areas that are open, in contact with nature. We will bring social interaction in the form of support groups, and the novelty would be that we were providing a new stress management technique every time we met. Next. So we were lucky to get NIH funding for this idea. We convinced the reviewers that it was worthwhile trying to do this study. So the aim of the study was essentially to develop a novel, integrative, and patient-centered approach that we hope to use as a complementary medicine approach. So patients will still get their usual treatment, and this will be an added-on approach. Next. And the study had two aims. The first aim was to assess the feasibility of this intervention. Will people like it? Will people participate? Will people get tired or get excited? We didn't know, right? So we needed to test that. And actually developing the intervention took meetings with an expert panel. And also we used input from the patient advisory committee. And then the second aim was then to test the efficacy of this behavioral intervention. And we had primary and secondary outcomes. As primary outcomes, we would be looking at pain perception and quality of life. And the secondary outcomes would be stress, which we're measuring with cortisol and saliva, inflammation in blood, and also we use standardized surveys to measure anxiety and depression. Next. So we set forth to recruit patients. We use a variety of methods, mostly social media, Facebook, Twitter, and we even learned how to do Instagram reels like this one, where we're using pictures of the actual interventions to try to entice other women to join the study for the second part, which will be happening in February. Next. So for the first session, we recruited patients that they were randomized to either having the intervention, which consisted in this 6 modules. As you can see, we were doing yoga by the beach, or mindfulness in a hot springs park, or acting it out, or drama therapy, or yogic breathing in different venues. As you can see, all venues were open spaced. And then the control group, which is really a waiting control group, because they will become the subjects for the second session, they were education only control. Next. And this is just to show you kind of the results so far. I mean, these are pictures of some of the interventions and the activities that these women participated. You can see the support groups by the beach, or in the countryside. And these are here, you can see some comments are in Spanish, but they say something like, this group, it's becoming like a family to me. Or I have found that this space is healing. And these are other pictures of the different venues, and we can assure you we're trying to provide patients with a comfortable environment where they can talk and they're not going to be judged. You openly talk and we'll listen to them, and it's just like the patient said, like a big family. And hopefully we will continue, seeing the different effects as the intervention progresses. Next. And the results are ongoing. We just finished the first session, but already the qualitative analysis of the support group discussions can tell us so much. Their patients are already telling us their stories and how they feel about their disease and what it represents to them. And we will be evaluating how this topics, these themes are going to be developing throughout the intervention, and we hopefully this qualitative analysis can give us a lot of rich data to contribute to the field. Next. This slide is just to remind you that this is an amazingly multidisciplinary effort. Our scientific team has experts from all these fields that you have seen, that you see here, but also importantly, we're also impacting students in the medical, psychology, public health programs of our school. So we are already teaching the next generation of health workers about what is endometriosis and what is their impact. And really this incredible expertise ensures that the studies are done in a rigorous way, right? Because we really want to provide the research field of endometriosis of really strong data that will support precisely our idea that it is important to tackle using behavioral interventions for stress in this disease. Next. So as I said, we're recruiting for the second session. And at the end of the study, really, we hope to demonstrate improvements in all our primary and secondary outcomes, but we do also realize that behavioral interventions may only exert limited or small effects. So there's a lot of data showing that combining a behavioral intervention with a pharmacological one, that will probably then boost the level of responses and make it more sustained responses. So this is our next step. And Annelyn will tell us a little bit what we're doing in that realm.
So as Caroline explained earlier today, we used also the rat animal model for endometriosis to use a pharmacological intervention that will decrease stress, right? And this experiment was also funded by the NIH. And what we use is a drug that antagonizes the corticotropin-releasing hormone. As you remember from the beginning of the presentation, corticotropin-releasing hormone, or CRH for short, is one of the main molecules in that whole cascade of stress. It's the initiator, right? But also corticotropin-releasing hormone is in uterine and ovarian tissues, as we know. So what we did is that we created the rat model, and we also measured the receptor at 7 days after the endometriosis onset, right? And what we found is that the vesicles were quite large, very well formed, most of them, and that the CRH receptor was quite high. So we immediately thought that there was a significant role of this receptor in starting that progression. So once we determined that, we antagonized the receptor. So basically what we did is that we wanted this increase not to happen. We gave the drug for 7 days to the animal, and then we allow the animal to be drug-free for an extended period of time, more than 50 days. The rationale behind that is that we wanted to know, is this a long-lasting treatment? And I'll explain to you in a minute why we wanted to do that. So as we hypothesized at that moment, right, what we found was that the vesicles, the 30% of them did not form at all. And remember, this is a very short treatment, and the animals were drug-free for a long time. But more importantly, even if they were formed, look how much smaller they were. They were 60% smaller. So that immediately was like, whoa, you know, we have something here that can actually stop that progression of endometriosis, of not getting worse, which is one of the biggest, problems that we have in the field. So that led to a patent. In the academic field, we have to protect, right, those applications. And what we protected is the use of these compounds against endometriosis, which was novel in the field. We are not patenting the compounds. The compounds are existent already. What we're patenting is the application towards endometriosis, which is what we want to bring forward, and it's very important for us. So how do we move this? Well, we created a startup, and this is what led to Sur180 Therapeutics. So as an academic, not in a million years, I thought that I was going to do this. But if we really want to bring stuff, this new therapeutics into the hands of women, this is the process. So we created this startup. We have been in operations for a couple of months already. And what we have done is to train ourselves in business and understand the pharmaceutical world. We have to understand it from the point of view of how to introduce the research and from the point of view of how to reach the hand of women most effectively. And we also wanted to establish our goal. So we're women working for women. So we hear you, we listen to you. We just don't want to be another therapeutic. We want to be a therapeutic that actually takes care of women as a whole. And that's why we started talking to you today about the other initiatives that we want and that we have for taking care of women, because we think that one of our goals is that we want to treat the individual, and the pharmaceutical alone might not cut it, right? It's going to help, but it might need to be in the context of a full program that reduces stress and that takes care of all the many aspects that endometriosis impacts. So why was Sur180 created? Well, we found in the field that that laparoscopy, which we know is unfortunately the only way right now to diagnose. Well, some OBGYNs do use sonography and some methods are still being tested, but well, many women end up with laparoscopy, right? After laparoscopy, women are put into other pharmacological agents, which are, many of you probably know that they cause many side effects: early menopause, joint pain, bone mineral density, depression, nausea, etc. But what we think is even worse is that this surgery is going to repeat itself, right? Because we know from statistics that 62% of women end up with the second surgery in less than 2 years, 50% within 5 years, and then 20% end up in hysterectomy or removal of the ovaries. And a friend told me, a friend and a patient told me once, I don't want to be mutilated. And when she used that word, for me was so impacting because I have never seen it that way. And that was the first time I was like, wow, you know, this is a serious problem that need attention because we don't want to get here. And that's exactly what we're trying to solve, right? What we're doing is that we're repositioning compounds that stayed in the preclinical arena. They have never been on the market. So it is, you know, this cannot be prescribed right now, but our goal is that we want to commercialize these products. How? Well, we want to bring them back into clinical trials. In this case, not for the original indication for which they were created, but for the new indication, endometriosis. We know they are safe. Many of these compounds have passed phase 1 trials, most of them. And phase 1 trials are the FDA trials that test safety. So we know they're safe. Side effects are very comparable to many others, not to the ones in the market right now, but like, you know, some other drugs like nausea, a little bit of dizziness, like, you know, side effects that are common for many medications, but not hormonal. These are not hormonal medications, so they are not going to cause the same side effects of the drugs that are right now in the market. What is our goal? Our goal is to, well, two goals. It's also to save hospitalization costs, right, and surgical interventions, but also to increase the productivity and quality of life, not having to think about, oh my God, within 2 years, I have to go again. Oh my God, this is just disrupting my life so much. So we want a medication that will have long-term effectiveness and will protect the women, right, for a longer period of time to avoid these repeated surgical interventions. Why we think we're different is because, again, I just mentioned the long-term effectiveness. We're testing different things, and one of the possible medication ways that the possible models is to do medication holidays, where women can take the medication for a short period of time and then repeated after a certain time, just to maintain that efficacy, but we know it has long-term effects, then we don't have to have, potentially we don't have to have the women in the medication all the time, right? We have lower side effects, not the same side effects that are right there in the market right now. It's a non-surgical approach. And we're providing women with a better disease management and doctors as well. Why? Because with many of the clinicians that I have talked to, they say, I just don't have anything. You know, it's like, it's always the same thing. So they want something that will improve the disease management, that will improve those outcomes. As I mentioned, we are repositioning the drug so we can go into the market a little bit faster, yet we still have to go through FDA approvals. So we are expecting or projecting that we can go into the market within a time frame of 5 to 7 years. Again, this is some of the advantages that we are going to have, lower side effects. We also think that endometriosis is not the same for everyone, right? So perhaps our drug can cover some of those women that do not respond to actual treatment. As I mentioned, OBGYNs will have better disease management, saving for health insurances. And in terms of the investors, which is unfortunately or fortunately, however we want to see it, right? A scenario that we have to work in. Oh, wait, hold on. What happened here? Sorry. Investors will also have an advantage right there. Why does this keep following forward? This is weird. Maybe it's my mouse, sorry. Okay, where we are right now, where the start is, right? We have done some of the discovery and some of the preclinical evaluation. We are identifying some of the effects of these drugs and how it treats pain and fertility. We are doing research and development in Puerto Rico because it's very cost effective. We have highly trained personnel. And of course, we have a beautiful network of people that we can work with and that know the patients. What we need is right now initial seed money to go into the FDA. Getting into the FDA costs money, right? We need consultants. And once we are there, we can get venture capital investors that will put pretty significant amount of money into moving this into the clinical trials. As you see here on the timeline, this is an optimal timeline where we can get this into market towards 2028. So what is the message for today? The message for today is threefold, is to participate. It is with women, with patients, with researchers, and with the whole community where we can engage, listen to each other, and move all these different initiatives forward. We have to educate ourselves. We have to educate our colleagues, our family members, and everybody in the different types of communities, right? Whether it is in our work environment, whether it is in our friends' environment. And we also have to sometimes donate. This is how many initiatives across the United States move forward. And in our case, the donations are going to be used exclusively for putting all the paperwork that is needed together to file a new investigational drug within the FDA. So this is the story for Sur180 Therapeutics, from the science to the translational aspects to where we are now, trying to bring new findings and new therapeutics into the hands of many women that will hopefully benefit from it. And at this point, I'm going to be taking some questions, and this is it.
Absolutely fascinating. Can you just stop your screen share for a minute?
Sure.
Well, that was just amazing. Now we're all here. Now we're all here together. I think it's really incredible because as a physical therapist, one of the reasons why we think physical therapy is so good for symptom management is attenuating to that HPA axis And I not only remember the initial rat research coming out and me thinking, we're stressing out the rats. We have to go heckle the rats. We have to, but I remember when you were seeking participants to do now what is the other piece of this. We have a couple questions from the crowd. One of the questions is, how do you monitor are you monitoring only symptomatically, or in humans, are you able to manage any kind of cellular changes?
This is for the behavioral intervention, because that's, the only human study that we have so far. Yeah, so no, we never intended to monitor the disease per se. So what we're monitoring, because this is a behavioral intervention and we do not expect it to have, even though in the rat we did see physiological effects in the size of the lesion, etc. You know that in the rat it's very easy to do surgeries, right? And check before and after in the middle. But in humans, ethical considerations cannot allow us to do a laparoscopy just to see, oh, let's see how it's going. No, it's really impossible to do, right? And also because it's a behavioral intervention, we went from the get-go, we were expecting the impact to be not so dramatic at the physiological level, but more dramatic in perception. So what we're measuring as outcome, when I said pain, we're measuring pain, changes in pain perception. And we were not expecting it to be like from 10 to 0, like only with a behavior intervention, but we were looking for clinically meaningful changes. Say, for example, so before my pain was 7 out of 10, after the intervention is 4 out of 10. It's not 0, but there's a substantial change. We were also looking at other parameters such as inflammation. Like when we get the endobelly, right? Because we're inflamed, and that not necessarily a huge symptom, but it's a bothersome one. And of course, it means that there's something going on in our bodies that's not good. So if we could see an improvement in the inflammation, that was another thing that we were trying to measure. And finally, we wanted to measure impact on quality of life, or more subjective measure. Why? Because maybe the pain, like I said, the change in the pain is not that big, but that small change can so dramatically affect or the way that we perceive that change it's so good, it's so dramatic that it's just what we need. Kind of like a hopeful scenario where like, I did this and I could improve this much, and the benefit, I guess, it feels even larger is what I'm trying to say, if that makes sense. But I hope I answered the question, that we're not literally looking at whether the disease progressed or not in the humans. We would love to find a way to do it in a non-invasive way, hopefully with some of the amazing work that's coming out with imaging, new imaging technologies that are not invasive, or even with biomarkers in blood that we can do like the before and after using those kind of markers of. That'll be awesome. But we are not going to do laparoscopies on our patients, no.
Yeah, and I think one of the top things that we get comments on with the Endometriosis Summit across all of our entities is, but care is inaccessible. So we know that excision works, but actually how there aren't every nook and cranny in the world, in the United States, in Puerto Rico, and everywhere else that can actually access excision. And I know your work in Puerto Rico, and I know that your population really struggles to find something. So developing something, it's okay to say this deals with symptom management versus every single minute we're going to attenuate to the lesion, because you can't, that's not accessible for everyone. I see you all nodding. Was this the theory behind what you're doing?
That's right. That, as I said before, focus just on the lesion? No, we have to focus on the women, on the individual. So do we need pharmacological to focus our surgical interventions to focus on the lesion? Yes, but then also the other type of work to manage the pain, the stress, the depression, the improved quality of life. That's part of how we see it.
I still just find it mind blowing because a PT always looks at the whole person. And now you're actually producing research that says that's doing something for the system. I think that that's incredible. But I also have to say, when you showed those retreats, it's like everything you are as a person, like, because I know you a little bit as a person, but it's like everything, your whole career, you've been trying to instill upon people with endometriosis that they have to treat the whole person, that it's not just about a gynecologist, that it's, and then the other piece of it is it provides a sense of community. And I think, like, with the Endometriosis Summit, that's one of our top 3 goals, is to provide connection to each other. And I think it's just very interesting that you actually have research to back that. We have another question, and they wanted to know if there's any evidence, or you could even in some ways give your own opinion about we talk about recurrence post-excision. Is there any evidence, or is there any thought process that this would help stop recurrence, or at least I would think it would help the body deal with what's going on if there is a recurrence? Yeah.
Right. So when we look at endometriosis, so from what the preclinical research is telling us, and what we know about how a corticotropin releasing hormone behaves, we know that it's really important in initiating these proliferative processes in the body, right? So if we target it right before that proliferative process starts going out of control, then we have a way of managing that recurrence. So let me just back up one step. Why surgeries recur? Well, they recur because endometriosis grows back again, right? And also because of the pain. So if we go into the area of the endometriosis growing back again, then we can control that with the pharmacological agents that we're going to be promoting or trying to get into clinical trials via Sur180. Yes. So we know from the science that we can do that part. We're looking for answers of whether or not we're going to be controlling also the pain. We don't have that answer yet, but we're going to have it soon.
Yeah, I can't wait till you have that answer. So I wonder, of course, our reproductive immunologist stepped out for the evening, but when we talk about implantation and people with endometriosis, it's typically that immune response that inflammatory response that's preventing implantation. What have you done any work with this and fertility patients and miscarriage and implantation, or you haven't gotten that specific yet?
Not that specific, and not in humans, and in rats we are planning the experiments. And we so we have some protocols already in place for other drugs that we were testing. And by protocols I mean the way you will do the experiments, like the mating at the proper time, and to measure not only fecundity rate, you know, how many times the females got pregnant, and how many pups, and whether the pups were fully, I mean, all the works. I mean, we have the protocol, but we have yet to start their studies. That's next. That's
right.
Coming up.
So I think it's just really important. You'll notice in the link for those of you on Zoom, and I have put it on Facebook, I have put the campaign. Can you talk a little bit about your campaign? Because we want people to support you.
Yes, so Sur180 is pretty young, and it's the mechanism of how we bring things from the bench, literally, to the hands of women. And to do that, we need financial support, and the financial support is specifically to move the research forward. Unfortunately, the processes for approving drugs are very expensive in the United States. They run into millions, and this is the process of how we start. We can start very, very small, right? But a little bit at a time, we can grow big enough that we can test more women. We can open again the clinical trials, test this in the hands of women, and then bring this into the commercial arena, hopefully within a period of 5 is the shortest we can do, maybe 7 years.
We have women volunteering all over our comments. They're like, when are you? No, I think because you show those pictures of, educate in the open spaces of Puerto Rico, and now everybody wants to volunteer. That's it. What was it like being women trying to bring this to market?
So I have had to incur in the business world as a leader of the company, and I have had to unlearn processes to learn other procedures in the business world. The business language and the pharmaceutical language, I have to say, it's not difficult. It's just unique, right? And I have had, sometimes I tell my colleagues, Caroline and Idhaliz, that I have to take my scientist hat and then put on my business hat, right? When I'm talking about this. Sometimes I wish there was an easier way, a faster way. But in the United States, we deal with the FDA, which is a fantastic mechanism to ensure the safety of patients. We're going to go through it. And I think we have our goal, we have our set mind, and I think we're going to be successful, hopefully, because that's our goal, is to benefit women. Just like us.
I think it's very important because, as scientists, you're coming from one direction and you're very, regimented in a way of thinking. And then for the business side of you, they really want to see, but what is the end point, etc. But I think one of the hurdles that I know Annelyn has been dealing a lot with, because she's the one that's working more on the business side, is that you're quite often talking to a room of males. And she gave a very interesting analogy the other day. Remember when you told me about the drug repurposing? Yeah. Because they just don't get it sometimes, I mean, and that's part of, over the years, the issue perhaps with addressing the disease, with not having the empathy from perhaps the male doctors versus female doctors, or people who are not undergoing, But you had a very good analogy which hit home, apparently. With some of them.
So a week ago, I was presenting to a group of angel investors here in the Rio Grande Valley. They're a small group, but there's only one female investor in that group. And she set me apart like 2 minutes after starting. And she's like, look, you're speaking only to men in this audience. So this is the example that you're going to say. You're going to say that what you're trying to do is like Viagra. Viagra was actually designed for something, but it ended up not being marketed for that, but for the side effects. In our case, we're trying to do the same, but in this case, it's not the side effects, it's actually an effect that the drug has. But it's the same. So I used that analogy, and all the men in the room were like, whoa, I love this. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, and Caroline, thank you for bringing that up. It's just to have men relate and understand. It might not be that easy because they don't go through the processes or the physiology, we should say. That's a big challenge.
It's funny, you probably don't remember this, but the dinner I met Idhaliz at in Brazil, we were with a researcher from MIT who was saying that almost the same thing, that you have to be able to pitch and relate to people who don't have endometriosis, which my crowd almost all has endometriosis. So but she said that, she always goes around the room and asks who's connected to somebody who's had a miscarriage, who's connected to somebody who has menstrual cramps. And everybody knows somebody who has endometriosis, and that it became about having a pit. And in some ways, when I have to get investors for the summit, I'm very good at this because I find the rep who's like, yeah, my wife has terrible cramps. And then I just hit him for hours until he hands me some money. So everybody's connected to that. I also wonder, because you talk about changing lives, there's a new endometriosis caucus founded by the representative from Georgia about talking to her office just so she knows you're on the radar, because surgery can be really inaccessible. The dealing with the other side of the access and those types of drugs can have really high side effects. And I think it's time that shift in the narrative could start happening with you guys on their radar. So, anyway, the Endometriosis Summit is coming up. Tickets are on sale. We may end up switching a lot to virtual because of the variant. We don't quite know yet, but we might try to put a panel together with you guys to do all of this over again, but which we would love, right? Because we're a little geeky that way. But the other piece of it is, and I don't know if it's at help at all, you'll have to see what life is. You're welcome to a table at our event if it helps introduce you, or if it helps you recruit. We want to support you however we can, because again, you're women trying to help those with endometriosis, and we're all just trying to do the same thing. So that's how, we're going to try to help you so far. And it was really awesome.
You, Sally. Thank you.
I loved the presentation. And I can't wait to see, I really want to see the fertility research, but I can't wait to see, more. Yeah.
Soon. We're going to have new results soon. Hopefully, by the spring. So as soon as I have that, I promise you're going to be one of the first ones to know the results. I can send you by email. Okay. So we'll let you know. We'll certainly let you know, because we're really excited about that. About
super exciting right now, and everything's underway. We got some pilot funding to carry out some follow-up experiments. So we're following up on it. So hopefully we get all that additional data soon, which helps support.
And I wanted to mention, Sally, that I know sometimes we get frustrated as patients when we don't see things coming up as quickly into the market as we'd like. But as scientists, we can assure you we're working very hard to make these studies in a rigorous way, so that there is no doubt of the accuracy, of the efficacy, of the safety of everything we do. That's why we use model systems first before doing anything humans, moving into humans. Sometimes it takes few years, sometimes it takes, sadly, up to decades. And I know it's a lot to ask women right now to be patient about this, but we need to trust the process. And hopefully when there are good drugs, that process can be expedited just because the data looks so good. And I encourage, when you hear about a clinical trial going on for this drug, participate and or share it with others who might participate, because otherwise we're not moving science forward. We need to be participants. We need to be patient, but you're patient because we're trying to do this the right way. We don't want any shadow cast or any doubt that we're doing something, for whatever other purpose that isn't bringing a solution to a big problem.
Right.
100% agree.
I 100%. I also, there's so much that benefits from this coming to market. Like I've said, the whole basis of pelvic PT is based on the HPA access. So the better your research is, the more it strengthens really my profession. And people think, but access to care, but paying for, but this is how you get that, unfortunately, eventually, But this is how you get that better research, new product development, and that's how it comes. So we have to think about all that before I let you go, because I have you here. Have you taken a look at all at Ferring's dopamine ring? Yeah, you have?
We are trying to get the trial to Puerto Rico, but it has been challenging. But I've seen the data. I like the data so far, but I would love to have it tested in Puerto Rican women, but there's some hurdles we need to tackle.
Yeah, one of the hurdles I think becomes they've not been able to execute that trial so well. So I think about how big a company they are and how little company startups are, because they're outside my door in New Jersey, because you have some New Jersey roots too. And is that mechanism, is it similar like what you're trying to do, where they're attempting to modulate a different mechanism, the stress mechanism, as opposed to modulate like the hormonal axis? Would you say they're at all similar, or you think I'm drawing too many conclusions?
It's different targets. It's the production of new blood vessels. It's called angiogenesis.
Yeah.
And it's also anti-inflammation. It's an anti-IL-6. So it's a drug that does these two things. So it's different from Sur180, and it's not hormonal either. And I really like the fact that it's a vaginal ring rather than an injection, for instance. But yeah, clinical trials are tough to implement. There's a lot of paperwork, a lot of red tape. So yeah, it's hard.
But it'll come. And I think when you guys have good science behind it, you'll be able to process through. We have put those links up. We do want to invite you to be a part of the Indiegogo campaign to help Sur180. And we want you to be a part of their future, because this is one thing you can do as a person with endometriosis to engage in your own future. And it is so exciting to have the three of you here, and we'll be in touch. We're going to have a whole I got to go look at the program and see who I can throw off my faculty to bring the three of you onto my faculty. But we will talk about how it goes down and talk about if there's anything else we can do to help you. This was a great night. Anything else you want all of us to know?
We're really excited. We're committed. Yes, even if it takes us a decade, we have worked together already a decade. We want this to happen. So any little bit that helps, and people like you, Sally, that are fantastic and have always, been a great support and a great research for us, for understanding the field and for understanding women and treatment options. We'll take it. We want to listen to everybody.
As my background as a clinical pharmacologist, this is like the dream when you go from actually, to follow it all the way through. And yeah, it's very exciting. And we know how much something new is needed. So we really hope that this is going to be beneficial and work out and help fill a gap, which is out there.
It's just incredible how you tied in your science background, but this desire to treat the whole person. It's just a really, it's definitely a novel change, right? Because we haven't been doing that yet. We might as well try to do that now. Yeah. All right. So as we wrap up, I just wanted a few announcements. Tickets for the Endometriosis Summit are on sale. Pre-sale ends on Friday and prices will increase. And I also want to announce we have expanded our virtual capacity, so you can watch from anywhere in the world because there's a recording now. And we'll see you next week. We are here, I believe, with a urologist and a general surgeon. So something that's totally different, which, you have to introduce everything because it's a whole person, but it'll be very different. And I believe Dr. Lariche will be here talking about kidney death from endometriosis. I think that's what we're leaning towards next week, but we will see you soon. And thank you everybody for joining us. Good night.
Thank